good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sisters of Legacy. We thank you for coming in. I'm going to go ahead and run the intro and we'll be right back. All right. Ladies, welcome. So tonight we have a special guest. We're going to introduce our guest first. We have Shanetta McNair. Wave to the wonderful people. And then, of course, we have Tangela Terrell and Katrina Taylor.
Hey,
So, yes, ladies, we are here this fine Tuesday evening with this interesting topic. So, let me pull up. Is submission still a thing? My producer always has to make things, a little catchy. So that was his spin on it. But we are going to be talking about submission in marriage from a woman's standpoint, for the most part. So who wants to jump right in?
hmm
Anybody?
so just to share kind of my thoughts, I've been thinking about this and talking to some people about submission. I think it's still a thing, but I think the definition has been polluted, and I think it's been, um, I would say, abused
Okay.
in some cases. And I don't know if the true context and the true expression of submission has truly been highlighted the way the negative connotation of submission has been.
Okay. In what way?
Well, I think when
Uh
you
oh.
hear submission and slave and be subjected to, but I don't think that was God's intention when it came to submission.
Okay.
Um, I honestly think submission is a gift, and it's knowing that you have certain power and certain authority, but you choose to express in a humble way to your husband. I don't think that's something that you do to everybody, but I think it plays a bigger part in the marital picture. I don't think it's just to be a doormat for your husband to walk all over you, but I think it's um, like I said, I think it's a gift that you offer the marriage. And I think it's a part of the role that we play as women. But I don't think that women are the only ones who can submit or who should submit.
Okay.
I think it's important that if we're going to talk about the biblical portion of submission and where it says the wives to submit, that the other side of that is what the husband has to do. And it says that the husband is to love the wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. So if the husband is loving the wife in the manner that Christ loved the church, then she's safe to submit to him because Christ gave himself on the cross, you see. So if a husband is willing to give himself that way, then he's not going to treat her like a doormat. He's
Right.
not going to abuse the submission. You know what I mean? So you have those two things go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. You just can't have the husband saying submit and he's not loving the wife as Christ loved the church. They have to go together or it's not going to work.
Okay.
I think that when we think about the word submit in 2020, that we begin to think about more so the opposite of what submit means, and we think about dominant. So in order for me to submit, somebody has to be dominant. And if you're telling a woman in 2020 that the man is supposed to be dominant, I think that's where all the wires get crossed, and we're kind of like, no, I'm this independent woman. I was taught that I can go to college, have an education, equal pay, fair rights. And that's where our brains go in 2020. And it's not really the true context of what scripture meant for a wife being submissive to her.
Okay, so let me ask a question. So if your husband, so let's say you get married, you're a believer, maybe he's not. Is it still a woman's responsibility to submit to her husband? Or
Why
is
they get
it,
married if he's a believer and she's not? I mean, if she's a believer, why they get married?
it happens. I mean, let's not act like it doesn't happen.
And I think that's a good question, though, Sister McNair. I don't know. I know you're Sister McNair, so it's hard for me to call you.
can say that.
But I think, okay, and to your point, Sam, it does happen. But I think that's we get confused when we try to force biblical principles in non-biblical situations.
Yeah.
So it's, you don't want to necessarily, follow the biblical guidelines, but you want the biblical blessings. And I think when we look at marriage, we have to look at that. And that's not to say it won't work. I've heard countless testimonies where, women who were saved, who had husbands who were not saved, and they were converted based on, their relationship with God. But, I think there's some due diligence on the front end, to say, not this is somebody I can win him for Christ. Try to win him before marriage, because that's going to be an uphill battle, because, is he following godly principles? Because will the expectation still be the same? It could be, but I don't think a wife can say, well, you're not saved, so I don't have to submit to you. But it can get tricky.
And I think in that case, I think it's important before marriage to have a definition of what submission is from both of you, so that you know going in what the expectations are.
Right.
And of course, before marriage, there's that whole expectations on every level in marriage, but especially on that topic, like, well, what is your definition of submission? Here's what mine is. So that's very important.
I think in modern day, even in modern day weddings, a lot of people want to take out the word obey out of the vows when they're preparing for even their weddings. I was watching a clip of a video of this lady, and they were at the altar getting married, and the preacher said, I promise to love, honor, cherish, and obey. And she said, obey who? And and she was like, it's like the look on her face was just like, so like, we didn't discuss this. Like, obey who? Obey what?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that those are things that should come out before you get married. It should be talked about. It should be discussed before you're taking that trip down the aisle. You should have those. You have to have those conversations, because what looks like submission to me from the house that I was raised in may look very different, because we're from two different families, and submission may look different in my house than what it looked in your house. So what does this look like for us?
Right.
Okay, so um, so I'm thinking, in terms of 2020, right? So I if you're submitting to your husband, you're both believers. Let's just make the scenario easier for y'all to accept. So you're both believers. Do you just submit when you agree with him? What does submission look like when you don't agree with the direction?
Well, I can speak personally, and my husband will tell you. I don't know if he's watching. I'm never not going to have an opinion on anything that we do, and thankfully, he's secure enough to for us to have discussion before decisions are made, even if it doesn't directly affect me. So we can disagree all day long, but at the end of the day, we got to have an answer. We have to have. Oh, he said he watching. But at the end of the day, we have to go in a direction. And when we get married, we're one. We can't be divided. We can't, well, you do you and I'm gonna do me. We have to be on the same page.
Right.
But submission doesn't mean I just completely lose all of my brain cells.
Right.
I will have an opinion about everything. If you choose to listen or not, that's on you. But I think most wise men will value a wise woman.
Right.
Because I think most men will value having somebody who will, be honest, will be, tell you the truth in love, but will still ride with you no matter what the decision is.
Okay. I think his poorly written question is maybe, does submission exist when he's wrong? I'm guessing. I think that was the question or what it was intended to be. But I think you kind of answered that. Yes. Does submission exist when he's wrong?
I would definitely say yes, it still exists. There has to be, I think, a level of mutual respect between a husband and a wife, where even if the decision is wrong, even if I don't agree with the decision and I say, okay, it's your call. This is what we're going to do. Let, go with it, and we go with it. And let's say we go with it and it turns out that I was right. The mutual respect that we have for one another, the respect that I have for him, I'm not gonna be like, see, I told you. It's gonna kind of be like, okay, we're here now, we're in this, but like, how do we fix it? How do we come back from this? How do we repair this situation? Even though, in my mind, I think that this is the way it should have gone. So sometimes, yes, you do have to go with, if that's the way it's going. And then there are other times where you just have to, you have to use, what you got to, kind of persuade and help him to understand that this is really his idea.
Wait, so you gonna have to clarify that one. So oh, okay, you don't brag that he was wrong, but do you ever bring it back up? Wait, hold on. Before you answer that, so elaborate a little bit, Janetta.
You got to work with the operation of persuasion. You got to let him think it was his idea. So you have to know your husband. You have to know what you're working with, and you have to know how to talk to him and how to help him to kind of make the right decision. And sometimes it can't just be saying outright, okay, you got to do it this way. This is the way it has to look, because he can't hear it that way. Right. It may have to be kind of subtle hint. It may have to be kind of that rub on the back of the head. It might have to be, let's have this conversation later. And, it might have to be whatever it takes for your end. You have to kind of figure that out and kind of help him to understand what his answer really should be.
Okay. So Ephraim said, okay, you don't brag that he was wrong, but do you ever bring it back up? I don't think bringing it back up has anything to do with submission. I mean, I think, to some degree, it's kind of like a natural part of conversation. Like, I'm not gonna bring it up and throw it in your face, but like for me, I'll say this: if I see that we're heading down the same road, I'll make a note to say, okay, babe, remember we tried it this way last time and it didn't quite work out. Maybe we should try it, try something different this time. So yeah, I will bring it back up, like, maybe one of those, okay, we figured it out, we worked it out, we passed it, but we don't never ever need to do that again.
Yeah.
And I think Shanetta, you talked about mutual respect. And when you're making decisions with your husband or wife, you trust that person already. I mean, you know they have a good head on their shoulders. You're not like following him over a cliff. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not like you trust him to make sound decisions already. So even if you don't agree with this one, you know that you're gonna compromise and you talked it out. Like, I don't know about that part. I don't know. You're not just, you trust him not to say, all right, we're about to drive off this cliff and you submit. So here we go off the cliff. Like you already know that you guys discussed it and his thinking about it. Well, that could work. I don't really agree, but you know what I mean? So it's about mutual respect, trusting him, and ultimately a compromise at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. And Edwin said, is the wife the only one who is required to submit in a marriage relationship?
I think there's a level of submission on both parts. It may come across in different ways, but I think what we have to be careful of is not forcing submission on anybody,
Right.
because at that point it becomes abuse. So I think it can be both ways. In certain situations, the husband may submit, you know, um, to the wife, but I don't think is 100%, black and white all the time. This is the way that it goes. I think the beauty of marriage is that it's individual and it's unique, meaning that you and your partner, you and your husband or your wife determines, with the counsel of God, what our marriage is and what does that look like,
Right.
without the influence, without the influence of anybody else telling, don't let her tell you what to do,
Right.
or you let her, who way to
Right.
pay into the house. And so there's a level of wisdom I think that should come with
Right.
how to use your submission. And, as Shanette, as you alluded to earlier, how to communicate. I think some of the challenges that today's women have is we're dominating in every field, education, career, and the, political sectors. So making that transition in the home sometimes it can be a little challenging, because when you're used to operating in a certain mode, it can, wait, I got to switch gears here.
That's true. Because if you're running around, you telling people what to do all day, you in charge all day. I guess it could be hard to get home and turn that off. My question, which somehow just slipped right out of my mind that fast. I had something that I wanted to say and it totally just skipped my mind. Oh, okay. So my question is, like, we talk about the strong black woman and all of this. Do you feel like women really don't want to submit? Like, do you think that's the case? Like, that women want to carry all the weight of a relationship, a household? Do you think women really want that responsibility? Or do you think sometimes, they found that themselves in that position so often that, they've just done it?
I think it varies. I think that some women have had bad examples in front of them, and the fear of what could happen if I let go of control, if I let go of the power and the independence that I can bring or that I have, kind of scares some people out of the idea of being able to let go, being able to be free and to relax, to say, hey, this person is not against me, they're for me. We're in this together. Um, so I don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen because we're in this together. And then I think some people, it's just, they just, they like being in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I think, and lack of understanding. I think someone said something about that earlier. Not really, understanding what true submission is.
Mhm.
I agree with what you said earlier. Like submission. You're giving somebody permission. I'm giving you a gift. Not I'm giving you permission to be a man, but I'm giving you, permission to lead me. I'm giving myself permission to be able to follow you because, sometimes that's hard, to be able to follow someone. But do you all appreciate the pressure that we're not under? It's on us if it goes wrong. Did ever? No. I mean, I will say I do appreciate, that as a man, of course, or a leader of anything, when you're the lead, yeah, the weight does fall on you. And I mean, if it goes wrong, yeah, it goes wrong for you and you might feel the brunt of it, but if it goes wrong, it's wrong for all of us. So I think, it's twofold. Like, as women, yes, we need to appreciate the amount of pressure, but as men, I think sometimes men forget that when it goes wrong, it affects us all. So when I'm saying, take another look at this before you jump, it's not because I want to be in control. It's because if you fall, we all fall. Like, it's a team. We all feel the weight of, a bad decision or, a failed decision or whatever it is. So I think it's kind of twofold.
I feel like I understand the question as far as the pressure. As a single mom, all the pressure's on me. If it goes wrong, whatever decision I make is all on me.
Right.
And sometimes, as far as that, do women want to submit? Do they want to give up the independence or whatever? Sometimes I feel like I want to have somebody to help with the decision making because I'm sitting here, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And sometimes I wish I had someone just to be there. Well, don't let them go there. As far as decision with the making with the kids. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody to toss it back and forth. So then if it do go wrong, I can blame you because you said they could. But it's also on me.
You was doing so good, and then you just took it out. Okay, so just as a side note, so Trina, I know that you don't, I guess, like to wear it like, this is what I am. Yes, you are a single mother now, but you are a widow. I mean, and I just wanted to clarify that because it just does add a little more clarity to the conversation. So, you were married and your husband, yeah. So I just wanted to add that in. What he said? Husband. Oh, but yeah, I do agree with you, that it is hard, it is harder when it's one person and you have to, bear the weight. That's why I said, it's twofold. Husbands have to understand, we here, we got your back and, we following and it is, it is pressure, but I think some of that pressure, it falls on us too. Like we're a team. So when when you beat yourself up or or you reel down about it, we feel that too. Like, it's twofold. It does affect everybody. Everybody under your umbrella gets hit with the same rain.
Right.
So do you think so submission is does money come into play anywhere when a woman is, asked to submit to her husband, or a wife is expected to submit to her husband, her godly husband? Should money come into play at all?
As in, like salary, like if the woman
Like,
makes
if
more.
she makes more money, should she not have to submit to him?
No, because you know what? Since we're talking godly marriage, if we look at the depiction of Christ's sacrifice, for us, he didn't put any conditions on that. He didn't say, okay, well, I'm gonna die for you, but you only if you go to church every Sunday, or I'm gonna die for you only if you promise to do this. So we can't put conditions and terms on our submission. I think that's a gift. If we're going to submit, we have to submit. And again, hopefully have some discussions. If there are some, financial concerns, have those discussions before marriage, so that once the marriage has been initiated, then, we all could be on the same page.
I would say whether, and I know that in the beginning we kind of asked the question of, well, why would they be getting married if one is saved and one is not? But it is like reality. So whether or not it's a marriage where both parties are saved, or a marriage where one is saved and one is not, I think it's the same. I think the same rules apply. If it should, is what I would say. But from my experience, when it comes down to money, there have been times in our marriage where I've made more money than my husband, and there have been times in our marriage where he's made more money than me. And in that example, what I would say is that for us, and what works for us, is that my money was in a pot. His money was in a pot, and it didn't matter who had bigger income or, whatever. It was, we got a household to take care of. We got things to do. We got stuff to do. And it was, okay, we're paying our tithes. We are paying these bills. We're doing this. And this is what we have to work. So it was, and there were times in my marriage where I didn't work at all. And I was a housewife. I was home with the kids. And it was never he makes the money and I had to kind of only, get an allowance or anything like that. It was more so of this is the money we have. Now for us, I've been the one that makes most of the financial decisions. So it was like he would say, okay, well, here's the money, here's the bills, take care of this, make sure all of this is taken care of. That was something that we kind of talked about, and we know what works for us. So I could say, okay, I'm going to write a check for this. Okay, I'm going to, I'm going to pay this. I'm going to take care of that. So the money, whether or not whoever makes the most money at a given time, because that can always change at any time. So it's not really about who makes the most money. It's about, what do we have to do with this money that we have?
I agree. And I think, even with the finances, we have to understand that the marriage is bigger than us individually. We have to, what's best for the family. And if we go into a marriage just thinking, I still want my independence, then do you really need to be married? No way we can block him.
Okay. So let me ask a question. So do you guys think there's any whatever in a marriage of believers, do you submit to a man and his decisions who is consistently missing the instruction of God, and you have clear plans for God? Yeah, he wants his decision. But how do you determine that he's consistently missing instruction from God? Like, how would you determine that? Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see God saying Anthony didn't listen when I told him to do A and B. So now I'm telling you, like, how would you determine that he's constantly missing? I mean, I believe, like, when you're married and you're both believers, and when God is speaking, generally it's a consistent message, across the board, because we know God is not the author of confusion. So, you know, I'm just trying to figure out how would you determine that? Trina, you was about to say something?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is like, if his decisions are that blatantly sinful decisions, like we gonna go down here and I don't know, I don't know, but like maybe that's the only, like I'm trying to just look at her question.
Right.
It would have to be something blatantly like
Yes, right, the will of God. Because what? Because previous decisions he made went left and blew up in financial or emotional ruin.
And I would still say submission does not mean you're mute. Submission doesn't mean that you have no say. So I think in addition to submission, you still have to communicate.
Yeah.
You still have to work together. So, and most of all, I think you both have a duty to pray. So I think asking or seeking God for wisdom, or how do I have this conversation? How do I state my concerns? And I'll be honest, that's something that I've learned in my marriage, because I too thought, submission is okay. Well, you want to make a decision, then you make it. But on the inside, I'm just like, I'm not with this. I don't agree with this. But what I've learned is that submission is utilizing the power that I have, sharing, my thoughts, my perspective on what could happen, and lending my voice to say, okay, well, let's talk through these options, and then share my concerns. But again, ultimately, this is the decision that you're going to make as the head of our family. Then I have to trust you. But at the same time, if that husband is taking advantage of that submission, then that's the problem. If he's saying, I'm the man, I'm the head, I do this, then that's an issue.
Right. And I'll say this. I think even under their circumstances where he is making those statements or even behaving that way, I don't feel like it would be my position as a wife to tell you, okay, so now you're not the head anymore. I think that's where, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's where, you really have to, like you say, you gotta increase those prayers. Cause trying to tell him, when you tell him he's been dethroned, like, what?
Well,
And then I also feel like sometimes, God allows things to happen in our lives or in our relationships or in our homes and families for a reason. So, I don't think that nullifies submission. Sometimes it can be that God put you, set you on this path, allowed you to be on this path as a lesson. Maybe not necessarily for you, maybe for someone you're connected to, maybe for you to have a testimony. It blew up financially, you had to file bankruptcy, you went broke, or whatever it is. It could be him setting you up for a story down the line, or him trying to show somebody else how he's working through your life. So I'm not going to say that just because a decision went left or blew up that he just didn't follow God, because I don't feel that would be accurate. Things happen. God allows things to happen for a reason, and our path and our story, is different from somebody else's. Like, what's the standards that we're looking at? Because I know there's been times where we've done stuff and it's gone all the way to the left. I mean, I wound up divorced. You can't get no more left than that. But to be honest, like when I think about things and the things, I'm not going to say God does, but that he allows us to do, Like I wouldn't be here, sitting here on this screen if we never got divorced. A lot of the things we're doing today would have never happened if we would have just stayed together. So, like I always try to look at things as a part of my story, a part of the path that God has set for us, as opposed to looking at it like, oh, well, you didn't follow God, as opposed to looking at the wrong in it, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I think
So,
everybody has a path, and that when we take our path, sometimes there are bumps in the road, sometimes there are curves in the road, sometimes there are things that just don't go well. It's our job in the midst of that, one, to pray that we can both make better decisions and that we know how to talk to each other so that we can communicate well, so that when we get to the earlier, I think somebody said, well, do you bring it back up and brag that you were right or anything? It may not necessarily be a bragging of being right. It shouldn't be a bragging, but we might need to talk about it.
Right.
We might need to talk about what didn't go well so that we don't go down that path, so that we can fix it, so that we can make it better. I think it deserves sometimes a conversation. So we made a bad, or if you made a bad call financially, and I always say we, because it may be his decision, but at the end of the day, it's our decision. So it's going to be a we. So nobody would ever know whether it was his decision or my decision, because it's our decision. This is what we decided. So this is what we're going with. Ooh, that was bad. That went real left. Okay, we're kind of broke now. We got to recover. We got to fix this. How do we fix it? But privately, we're going to have a conversation. Hey, babe, you remember you said, let's do this? That didn't really work out so well. So the next time we're at that crossroad, let's kind of go to the right and not really go in that direction. Don't you think that would work much better for us? I mean, it's the mutual respect, being able to have that conversation.
So, do you ladies think after this conversation that submission is still a thing? Because it seems to me, it sounds like partnerships. It sounds like a partnership more than I guess, the connotation of submission. It sounds like we're like, you who are married are in partnerships, and maybe you kind of defer to your husband when there's a stalemate, or if there's just to kind of make that final, I'll defer to you in this situation. But then there's other times when maybe he defer to you. So, like, to answer the major question, is submission still a thing? I don't know. It sounds like there's partnerships.
Well, I mean, I think submission done right behind closed doors to people presents as a partnership, because at the end of the day, like, your real submission to your husband takes place inside your home. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a daily lifestyle thing. So to the outside, yeah, it just looks like, oh, they worked great together. Like she said, when she talks, she don't say, my husband made the decision. It's like, we decided. So it looks like, the partnership, like we're working together, which is, essentially what it is. Because like Tangela said several times, you still have a voice. Like, I'm not sitting here mute and you dictating. Like, that's not gonna happen. We're still talking about things, and you're respecting me enough to listen, to hear what I'm saying, and then we make a decision. But I think submission done right should absolutely look like a partnership.
I think that sometimes in true submission, there will be times where you just are polar opposites and you really just disagree, and you do go with that decision that you just, in your heart of hearts, you just like, okay, if you say so, that's what we're going to do right now. Like, you have to kind of just grit it and kind of go with it. And I think that we've probably all had moments where it's just kind of like, you're looking and you're like, this is a train wreck just waiting to happen. Let's go. Go full speed ahead. And I think that's where the submission comes in. So I think it definitely is still a thing, even with a working partnership. I think there's still submission in the partnership. And then I think that there are still going to be moments that you're going to come up to and you're going to come across and you're just like, we're going in two different directions on this decision. Okay, go with whatever let's go.
Yeah, but again though, even in those times, where we don't agree, like I don't feel like anybody should ever see that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you shouldn't see that, we literally at two opposite ends of the field. That's why I said, like, behind closed doors, that's why we're gonna hash it out. But when we step outside these doors, like you said, go full speed ahead. We're gonna do this thing. But I think it definitely is, more of a personal thing, and it's kind of sad, that in 2020 there really is no room for personal anymore. Like everything has become so public and so open for discussion and so ridiculed and picked apart. I think about, so Trina, I'm gonna talk about your parents just a little bit. So, I as a child, I grew up in her dad's church, and her mother, her dad passed away. Her mom is still very much alive. So I remember her father was always very, very vocal because he was a pastor and he was really on it. But her mother was always like the sweetest. She always had a smile for you. He, breathed fire on you and she'd rub your back and tell you, it was going to be okay. And I remember, like, growing up, sometimes I used to look like, oh my gosh, how did she live with him? Like looking from the outside. And I can't say, whether, I'm sure they disagreed or whatever behind closed doors, but you would have never seen that from her. Like, she always had the same demeanor, always, the same spirit, always whatever. But like, I used to think like, oh my gosh, they like seem so different. And then I remember when I became an adult and I got married, and one of the times I went over to their house for dinner. And, it's different when you're an adult, when you're around a married couple. And I was like, oh, now that made sense, like seeing her say some things. But growing up, and to other people, she never let you see that side of it. She made sure that she always presented herself, a certain way as a wife. She didn't make things public or, try to tell him he was wrong, even though sometimes it just looked like he was left. But, she never did that. And I know, like, growing up, I always thought about that as an example. And I was like, Lord, I don't think I could be as sweet and mild as her, but just give me a little bit of it, But yeah, she kept things private. People kept their business to themselves. Like, now sometimes you go to church, you can tell the pastor fighting with his wife. But, everything is so public and so out there, and and I think that's the wrong way to handle things. That's never how you should allow people to see you in your relationship, period.
Yeah. Now, I will say every once in a while, your kids need to know that you disagree, because it teaches them on a level how to address disagreements and problems without it being, hopefully you're not being, crazy when you agree, all fighting and all that kind of stuff. But I think that it's good because when they have, even you were that wasn't your family, so you were kind of, on the outside. But I think that it's good for a kid to be able to say, oh, mom and dad don't agree on, something small, and they see you work it out and talk it out so that they learn how to do it.
Wait, I
agree, because I think that's
he done went deep Bible. Listen now.
That's my cousin.
Yeah, I know.
He's a preacher.
Listen, we're not about to I have to pull out the book now. You want some?
gotta look it up.
You looking it up? Oh, my ball is Yeah, but Abigail wrong for not submitting to her husband. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I mean, other than David, I'm drawing a blank.
You have to do an adequate study in order to give an appropriate answer.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. You got that answer. Go ahead, Tangela.
Yes.
But we
Yeah,
can follow up next week.
Yeah, we definitely would have to follow
And
up.
I did, read some cases in the Bible. There was Vashti, when when the king ordered her to come and dance for the people and she refused. But sometimes there, especially in the Bible, and I'm not saying in this case with Abigail and David, but in some cases, what we see has more historical and cultural context than just reading.
Right.
So, there's some verses in the Bible where it talks about women in a second class citizen way, but we also have to remember that was the culture of that time. So I think in order to not necessarily compare apples to apples, we have to make sure that we're looking in the in the historical sense of what was traditionally done and things like that. But I will be sure to put a pin in that and do.
As Anthony said, we definitely would have to put a pin in that because I'd hate to respond incorrectly. You gotta,
Right.
When you start digging into Bible stories, like you said, you got to be able to reference and do
Right.
the history and know what time this is happening in and all of the context and whatever. So yeah, that's the one thing you don't want to misrepresent is the word of God. You want to make sure, when you speak on that, you have some clear understanding of it. I will say, I think unfortunately we have allowed society to cloud the meaning and the justification of things, what society says about submission. I know when Tangela first talked to me or texted me about it, you brought up the conversation that Jeannie Mai had about, when she gets married this time, she wanted to be submissive to her husband. How much flack she caught from people from making that statement, and how society views things. And I feel like we can't continue to allow society to dictate who we are. And too many times we're trying to live up to what society says. When at the end of the day, when things go wrong, or when your husband leaves because you want to be in control and he don't want it, society does not come to your rescue. Right. They do not, they don't comfort you. They are not there when you are left to take care of your children because you don't ran your husband away because you a boss. Society is not, they're not coming to your aid. Like those things are not happening. So I think we have to use some better judgment and discernment with some of these things that we see and pick up on TV and try to, implement in our lives, right? Normalize healthy submission. But that, we have to be clear and understand what that means. You have to look, do some research, like pick up a book once in a while. It won't kill you. Don't just, don't just go with everything you saw. For a long time, my recipe for a relationship was I looked around at people and I don't want that. No, don't want that, and that was kind of the way that I governed some of the things that I thought about. When you're young, that works. When you're uneducated on what real relationship is, that sounds great. But being an adult, you have to go a little further past that. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to do a little research. Understand for yourself what submission is. And then ask your partner, what he expects out of you. Stop being with people and you want to tell them what you're willing to give them. Ask people and then be clear too on what you are willing to give. Look, maybe I saw my dad do this and I'm not really like my mother, so I don't want to do that. You'll be surprised when you love somebody and they love you back, what compromises that you really can come to? And there's no, like somebody said before, what works in my house works for Samantha and Anthony. What works in Tangela's house for her and Ephraim is for her and Ephraim. And what works for you and Michael, it's for you and Michael. It's different, from house to house. And so I think, you have to create your own scenario. Don't pick up stuff off the street and try to take it home because it's trendy. Eventually a stray dog might bite you. Like, stop picking up all this stray stuff and trendy stuff and taking it home to your house and to your relationship. And
that's a good point, because a lot of times some things that we see could have its roots in something else.
Toxic.
And then the next thing you know, you're introducing a thought behavior into your family, and he's like, okay, well, why is everything kind of crazy? But when you base it on the Word of God, invite the Holy Spirit into your marriage, then at least it has a better chance for success, as opposed to betting on some other source. Some of these things we see now is kind of like, where are we going with it? But at least I can count on the Word of God, and I know that as a woman, if we're following God, we will be at peace.
Right. I totally agree. Any last words, ladies?
I thoroughly enjoyed being here tonight.
What'd you say?
I thoroughly enjoyed being here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. So we want to thank all our viewers. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for coming into the room. We appreciate your time, and we do not take it for granted. Like I said, submission done correctly behind closed doors, once you walk out, looks like partnership. And that's the way it should be. Keep your private and personal between you and your mate. Include prayer, include God, follow the word, have some guidelines, and don't look for him to be wrong. Don't look for the wrong. You focus on being the submissive, prayerful wife. Like, God will chastise him when he get out of line. I can assure you, God is not slack on those things. So keep those things in mind. We hope that we have said something to at least spark a conversation in your house. All right, guys. So thank you for, he said, I behaved tonight.
Definitely did, because I just knew some more comments was going to be coming. That one.
But we thank you, Mr. McNair, for behaving. That's always appreciated. All right, ladies, hold tight. Thank you guys again for watching. Have a great night, and we will see you again next Tuesday.